I never thought a single sentence could shatter 28 years of family loyalty until my parents spoke those words at Thanksgiving dinner. There I was sitting in their suburban Connecticut dining room, golden retriever Buddy, waiting patiently beside my chair when my sister Emma started her usual complaints about needing money for her Los Angeles apartment. The turkey carved perfectly on the table, cranberry sauce glistening in grandmother's crystal bowl. Everything picture perfect except for what came next. My father, Gerald, looked directly at me and said, "Your sister was born to live soft. You make money for her. Got a problem with that? There's the door." The fork slipped from my hand. The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I stared at my parents, searching their faces for any sign this was some twisted joke. My mother, Patricia, nodded in agreement, dabbing gravy from her lip with the cloth napkin I'd bought her last Christmas. "Alistair, honey, you need to understand something," she said, in that condescending tone she used when explaining why vegetables were good for me as a child. "Emma is different. She's an artist, a free spirit. She needs support to follow her dreams." Emma, 24 years old and sitting across from me, pushed her mashed potatoes around her plate with theatrical sadness. "I never asked for this," she whispered, though her voice carried just enough volume for everyone to hear. "But Los Angeles is expensive and my art isn't selling yet." Gerald wiped his mouth and leaned back in his chair, the same commanding posture he'd used when running his construction company before it failed 3 years ago. "Son, you've got that software engineering job making good money at that tech company. Your sister needs $3,000 monthly for rent, art supplies, yoga classes to keep her centered. It's only fair." Only fair. I'd been supporting my parents financially since Gerald's business went under, covering their mortgage payments, utilities, even their groceries some months. Now they wanted me to bankroll Emma's bohemian lifestyle across the country. "I just inherited Grandma Rose's house," I said carefully, hoping to redirect the conversation toward my own future plans. I was thinking about using that money to finally start my own consulting business. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Patricia's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down with deliberate precision. "Alistair Thompson, that inheritance belongs to this family," she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Your grandmother would want us to stick together, not for you to go off chasing selfish dreams." Gerald nodded vigorously. "Exactly right. We're thinking you should sign that inheritance over to a family fund. Let Emma access what she needs for her artistic journey." I felt my chest tighten. The inheritance was worth approximately $300,000 money I'd planned to use for starting fresh, maybe buying my own place, investing in my future. Now they wanted me to hand it over like some sort of family ATM machine. "Let me think about this," I said, pushing back from the table. "I need to use the restroom." Walking down the hallway lined with family photos, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, something I'd been meaning to check all week. My checking account balance made my blood run cold. There should have been $47,000 from my last quarterly bonus. Instead, the balance showed $18,000 with a series of withdrawals I definitely hadn't made. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the transactions. $500 here, $800 there, sometimes larger amounts of $1,500 or $2,000, all marked as transfer to savings. But I knew my savings account balance and these amounts weren't there. The bathroom suddenly felt smaller, walls closing in as realization hit me like a sledgehammer. My parents still had access to the joint checking account we'd opened when I started college 10 years ago. I'd completely forgotten about it, assuming they'd closed their access when I became financially independent. They'd been stealing from me for months, maybe longer. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror that had watched me grow from a teenager into an adult. The man looking back at me seemed older, somehow wiser, but wounded. Returning to the dining room, I watched my family with new eyes. Emma was showing my parents pictures on her phone, probably more expensive art supplies she needed for her latest creative phase. Gerald and Patricia hung on her every word like she was revealing the secrets of the universe. The thing is, Emma was saying, twirling a strand of her professionally highlighted hair, I really need a new MacBook Pro for digital art. The one I have is practically ancient, like 2 years old. 2 years old? I'd bought that laptop for her birthday, spent $2,500 I could barely afford at the time. Ancient. Don't worry, sweetheart, Patricia cooed, reaching over to squeeze Emma's hand. We'll figure something out. Gerald turned to me with expectant eyes. Alistair, you understand how important this is. Right, Emma's happiness matters more than keeping money in some bank account collecting dust. Collecting dust. My savings, my security, my future reduced to dust collecting in some corner they wanted to sweep away. Under the table, Buddy nudged my leg with his wet nose, sensing the tension radiating from my body. I scratched behind his ears, the one constant source of honest affection in this room full of manipulation. You know what I understand, Dad? I said quietly. My voice steady despite the storm brewing inside my chest. I understand that families should be honest with each other. The table went silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, counting down seconds toward a conversation that was about to change everything. Patricia's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composed demeanor. Of course we're honest with each other, honey. That's why we can talk openly about family responsibilities. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table, banking app still open, showing the mysterious withdrawals. Then maybe you can explain these transactions I never authorized. Gerald's face flushed red, the same color it turned when he got defensive about his failed business. That old joint account, son, that's family money. We put you through college, bought you clothes, fed you for 18 years. Consider it partial payback. Partial payback for raising your child. The words came out sharper than I intended. Is that what we're calling parental responsibility now? Emma looked up from her phone, finally paying attention to something other than herself. What's going on? What joint account? True. Nothing that concerns you, sweetheart, Patricia said quickly, shooting me a warning glance that used to make me back down as a teenager. Your brother is just being dramatic about finances. But I was done backing down. $47,000 over the past 2 years, Emma. That's what concerns her. Money they've been taking without asking while lecturing me about family obligations. Emma's perfectly manicured jaw dropped. She looked between our parents and me like she was watching a tennis match where the ball had suddenly caught fire. You took money from Alistair's account, she asked, her voice smaller than usual. Gerald slammed his hand on the table, making the wine glasses jump. It's not taking when it's family helping family. Your brother makes more money than he knows what to do with. Apparently, I didn't make enough to notice $50,000 disappearing, I replied, standing up slowly. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor like nails on a chalkboard. Patricia's eyes filled with tears, her go-to weapon when logic failed her. Alistair, please sit down. Let's discuss this calmly. We never meant to hurt you. Never meant to hurt me. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've been secretly funding Emma's lifestyle with money I earned while telling me I need to sacrifice more for the family. Emma stood up abruptly, her chair toppling backward. I need some air, she mumbled, heading toward the kitchen. I watched her go, noting the designer shoes that probably cost more than most people's rent, the diamond bracelet catching the light from the chandelier, the handbag that looked suspiciously like the Louis Vuitton catalog I'd seen her browsing online. Emma seems to be doing fine for someone who needs $3,000 a month for basic survival, I observed. Gerald followed my gaze toward the kitchen, then looked back at me with confusion creeping into his anger. Those are probably knockoffs. You know how young women like to look fashionable on a budget. But something in his voice suggested he wasn't entirely convinced anymore. Patricia fidgeted with her napkin, avoiding eye contact. From the kitchen came the sound of Emma's voice talking on her phone. She was trying to keep it quiet, but sound traveled in this old house, and I could hear fragments of her conversation. No, Marcus, I can't talk right now. Family dinner. Yes, the engagement party. And next month, hiding it until the trust fund. My blood turned to ice water. Engagement party. Trust fund Emma had been complaining about being broke and needing family support, but she was planning an engagement party. I moved toward the kitchen quietly, my parents too, caught up in their whispered argument to notice. Through the doorway, I could see Emma with her back to me, phone pressed to her ear. I already spent the money Dad gave me on the dress fitting, she was saying. I know, I should have told them about us, but they're so weird about money. It's easier to let them think I'm struggling. The kitchen tile was cold under my feet as I stepped closer, staying just out of sight. Marcus, baby, you don't understand. They actually think I'm this poor artist who can barely afford ramen noodles. If they knew about your family's money, they'd stop giving me anything. She laughed softly, a sound that made my skin crawl. Your dad owns half the commercial real estate in Hartford, and mine is worried about my rent money. It's actually kind of sweet how naive they are. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to process what I was hearing. Emma wasn't struggling. She wasn't some starving artist following her dreams. She was engaged to someone wealthy, playing my parents for fools while building her own nest egg. I have to go, Emma whispered into the phone. Alistair is being suspicious about family finances. I'll call you later about the catering menu. Footsteps approached the doorway. I quickly moved back toward the dining room, sliding into my chair just as Emma returned, her face flushed but attempting normalcy. Sorry about that, she said, settling back into her seat. My friend Jessica was having boy drama. You know how it is. Boy drama, right. Patricia reached across the table and patted Emma's hand. You're such a good friend, always there for people when they need you. Gerald nodded approvingly. That's our Emma, big heart, always putting others first. I stared at my sister, really looked at her for maybe the first time in years. The expensive highlights in her hair, the professional manicure, the subtle but costly makeup, the jewelry that definitely wasn't from Target. How had I never noticed before? Emma, I said carefully, tell me about your living situation in Los Angeles. Are you sharing an apartment studio? What neighborhood? Her eyes darted nervously between our parents and me. Oh, just a small place in, Hollywood adjacent. Nothing fancy. I share it with 2 other girls from art school. Art school, I repeated. Which one? The Art Institute. Very exclusive program. Super expensive, which is why I need help with supplies and things. I pulled out my phone again and did a quick search. The Art Institute of California in Los Angeles had closed 3 years ago. Interesting, I said, showing her my phone screen. Because according to this, your school shut down in 2021. The color drained from Emma's face. Patricia and Gerald looked confused, glancing between us like we were speaking a foreign language. I transferred, Emma stammered, to a different program, similar name, easy to mix up. But I wasn't mixing anything up anymore. The pieces were falling into place like a jigsaw puzzle, revealing a picture I didn't want to see. Emma was lying about everything my parents had been stealing from me to fund her lies, and I'd been the fool supporting this entire house of cards. Gerald cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should finish dinner and discuss finances later when everyone's had time to cool down. Actually, Dad, I think now is the perfect time, I said, setting my phone on the table again. Because I'm starting to realize that nothing about this family's finances is what it seems to be. The dining room felt like a courtroom, where I was simultaneously the prosecutor, the evidence, and the accused. Gerald loosened his tie, a nervous habit he'd developed since his business failed. Patricia kept glancing toward the kitchen as if escape routes were her new hobby. Emma, I said, keeping my voice level, I'd like you to tell me the truth about your engagement to Marcus. The word engagement hit the table like a dropped bomb. Patricia's mouth fell open. Gerald's water glass slipped from his hand, spilling across his dinner plate. What engagement? Patricia whispered, her voice barely audible, above the grandfather clock's relentless ticking. Emma's composure cracked like ice on a spring pond. I don't know what you're talking about. Marcus, I repeated, watching her face carefully. From your phone call just now. The one where you discussed engagement parties and trust funds? Gerald stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the wall. Emma Thompson, what is your brother talking about? The formal use of her full name made Emma flinch. She'd always been sweetheart, or princess, or baby girl in this house. Never Emma Thompson. Daddy, please sit down, she said, her voice taking on the little girl quality she used when trying to manipulate him. You're going to give yourself a heart attack. Answer the question, Gerald demanded, remaining standing. Emma looked around the table like a trapped animal seeking escape. Her perfectly applied makeup was starting to show stress cracks around her eyes. Fine, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm engaged to Marcus Wellington. But it's complicated. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the dishwasher humming in the kitchen, the furnace kicking on in the basement, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Patricia found her voice first. Wellington, as in Wellington Properties. Emma nodded miserably. Gerald sat down heavily, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and something approaching understanding. The Wellington family owns half the commercial real estate in Hartford County. I know, Emma said, tears starting to flow. Marcus is the son, the heir. We've been together for 8 months. 8 months, I repeated slowly. The same 8 months you've been telling us you're struggling to pay rent in Los Angeles. I was protecting you. Emma said, the tears coming faster now. You wouldn't understand. Protecting us from what? Patricia asked, her voice sharp with hurt. From knowing our daughter was happy and secure? From feeling inferior, Emma exploded, standing up and facing us all. From having to admit that your struggling artist daughter actually landed someone who could buy and sell this entire neighborhood without checking his bank balance first. The honesty was brutal and refreshing simultaneously. Gerald's voice was dangerously quiet. So when you asked for money for art supplies, I spent it on engagement ring insurance and wedding dress shopping? Emma admitted, collapsing back into her chair. Marcus insisted on a prenup, and I wanted to have some savings of my own. Patricia looked like someone had physically slapped her. Wedding dress shopping. You've been planning a wedding and didn't tell us. I was going to tell you after the holidays, Emma said weakly. Things got complicated. I pulled out my phone again and started doing math on the calculator app. $47,000 from my account over 2 years, plus whatever you've taken directly from Mom and Dad. Emma, exactly how much money have you collected for the secret wedding fund? Emma's silence answered the question more effectively than words could have. Gerald walked to the kitchen counter, where I now noticed a stack of papers he'd tried to hide under a dish towel. He pulled them out with shaking hands. Mortgage refinancing documents, he said, his voice hollow. We took out a second mortgage on the house last month, $50,000. We were planning to give it to Emma as a graduation gift when she finished art school. The graduation that would never happen because the school didn't exist. Patricia joined him at the counter, reading over his shoulder. Oh my God! Gerald, what have we done? I stood up and took the documents from his hands. The monthly payment on the second mortgage was $1,200. On Gerald's part-time income from his new job at the hardware store, that payment would destroy them. There's more, Gerald said, pulling out another set of papers. We took a loan against Alistair's inheritance through the estate lawyer. We assumed you'd sign the paperwork when the time came. My hands trembled as I read the legal documents. They owed $50,000 immediately if I didn't consent to the loan. Money they'd already spent on Emma's fictional future. You took out loans against money that doesn't belong to you. I said, my voice surprisingly calm, considering the hurricane of emotions swirling in my chest. Patricia broke down, completely sobbing into her hands. We thought we were helping our children. Emma with her dreams, you with what, Mom? How exactly does borrowing against my inheritance help me? She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. We thought you'd want to help your sister. We thought family meant taking care of each other. Gerald sat down at the kitchen counter, his head in his hands. The construction business didn't just fail, son. I lost a lawsuit from a workplace accident. We owe $75,000 in damages. Without this money from Emma's wedding gifts, we're looking at bankruptcy. The pieces kept falling into place, each one landing with the weight of betrayal and desperation. My parents hadn't just been stealing from me to spoil Emma. They'd been trying to save themselves from financial ruin while funding their daughter's secret wealthy lifestyle. Emma? I said, turning back to face her. Does Marcus know about any of this? The money you've been taking from family, the lies about art school, the financial situation here. She shook her head, mascara creating dark tracks down her cheeks. He thinks I'm some independent artist who's making it on her own talent. If he knew my family was basically funding my life, he'd probably call off the engagement. And you've been okay with watching mom and dad destroy their financial future for your wedding fund. I didn't know about the lawsuit, she whispered. I didn't know Dad owed money. I thought you all could afford it. The house felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in on secrets that had grown too large for the space to contain them. 4 people sitting around the ruins of trust they'd built over decades. Gerald looked up from the counter, his eyes wet with tears I hadn't seen since his business failed. We need you to be the man of this family, Alistair. Emma deserves happiness. You're strong enough to sacrifice for her. Strong enough to sacrifice. The words echoed in my mind as I looked around at my family. My parents who'd stolen from me while preaching family loyalty, my sister who'd lied to everyone while building her secret nest egg, and myself. The fool who'd been working overtime to support people who saw him as nothing more than a walking ATM machine. I realized in that moment that I felt simultaneously betrayed, heartbroken, and strangely relieved. For the first time in years, I could see the situation clearly without the fog of guilt and family obligation clouding my judgment. The truth was devastating, but it was also liberating. I excused myself from the emotional wreckage of our dining room and stepped onto the back porch, pulling out my phone to call David Chen, my college roommate who'd become a successful estate attorney. The November air was sharp against my face, cutting through the haze of family drama with refreshing clarity. David picked up on the second ring. Alistair, how's Thanksgiving going? Actually, that's why I'm calling. I need legal advice about inheritance loans and fraudulent account access. His tone shifted immediately to professional concern. What's going on? I explained the situation quickly. The unauthorized withdrawals, the loans taken against my inheritance, the web of lies Emma had spun around her fake struggling artist persona. They can't legally borrow against an inheritance without your signature, David said firmly. That loan is fraudulent. I can file papers to void it first thing Friday morning. Relief flooded through me like warm water. Thank you. I'll call you tomorrow to discuss next steps. Walking back toward the house, I decided to research Marcus Wellington more thoroughly. If Emma was going to marry into money while my parents bankrupted themselves, I wanted to know exactly what kind of family she was joining. The Wellington Properties website showed an impressive portfolio of commercial real estate across Connecticut. Marcus was listed as Vice President of Development, a position that probably came with his last name rather than his qualifications. His LinkedIn profile showed he'd graduated from an expensive private college with mediocre grades and had worked nowhere except his father's company. But as I dug deeper, something interesting emerged. Wellington Properties was actually my tech company's largest client. For the past 2 years, I'd been designing their financial management software, handling their digital infrastructure, processing their investment data. I knew their systems inside and out. A memory clicked into place irregular trading patterns I'd noticed in their cryptocurrency investments. Trades that seemed to predict market movements with unusual accuracy. At the time, I'd assumed someone at Wellington had excellent market research. Now I wondered if someone had been using insider information. I pulled up my work laptop and accessed the Wellington Properties financial data I'd been analyzing for software updates. The cryptocurrency trading patterns were even more suspicious when viewed with fresh eyes. Someone had made over $300,000 in profits over the past year, all from trades that perfectly timed market movements. Insider trading, using information from the real estate deals to predict cryptocurrency fluctuations. It was illegal, sophisticated, and profitable. And if Marcus was behind it, I had evidence of federal crime sitting in my laptop. I saved screenshots of the trading data and closed the laptop, my mind racing with possibilities. Emma thought she was marrying into respectable wealth, but her fiancé might be a white-collar criminal. Returning to the house, I found my family exactly where I'd left them, Emma crying at the dining table, Patricia comforting her Gerald, staring at mortgage papers like they might spontaneously combust. "I've been doing some research," I announced, causing all three heads to turn toward me. "About Marcus Wellington and his family business." Emma's tear-streaked face showed immediate alarm. "What kind of research?" "The kind that reveals interesting patterns in their financial activities." I set my laptop on the table and opened it to show the trading data. Marcus has been using insider information from real estate deals to manipulate cryptocurrency investments. It's called securities fraud, and it carries federal prison time. The room went silent except for the laptop's fan humming. Emma stared at the screen like it was written in hieroglyphics. "I don't understand what this means." "It means your rich fiancé is a criminal," I said bluntly. "And I have evidence that could destroy both him and his father's company." Gerald leaned over to look at the data, his construction background making him surprisingly good at reading financial documents. "These profit margins are impossible unless someone knew exactly when to buy and sell." Patricia wiped her eyes with a tissue. "Emma, did you know about this?" "Of course not." Emma stood up defensively. "Marcus never talks about work with me. He says business is boring." I closed the laptop and looked directly at my sister. "Emma, I need you to call Marcus. Tell him to come here tonight. Tell him your family wants to meet him properly before the engagement becomes official." "Why?" she asked suspiciously. "Because we need to have an honest conversation about his business practices and your family's financial situation." Emma pulled out her phone reluctantly. "He's not going to want to come here. He thinks you're all, poor," I suggested. She nodded miserably. "Perfect. Tell him you want to show off your family's support for the engagement. Make it sound like we're throwing you a celebration dinner." As Emma made the call, I sent David a text message asking him to arrange a meeting with his friend Jake Morrison, a detective with the white-collar crime unit. I also texted my boss about discovering a potential security breach in the Wellington Properties account that required immediate investigation. Emma finished her call and sat back down. "He'll be here in an hour. He's bringing flowers and wine to make a good impression." "Excellent," I said, feeling a sense of control returning for the first time all day. That gives us time to prepare for a very interesting conversation about honesty, family, and the consequences of deception. Gerald looked up from the mortgage papers with something approaching hope in his eyes. "What are you planning, son?" "Justice," I replied simply. "And maybe a little bit of education about what real family loyalty actually looks like." Patricia dabbed at her eyes again. "Alistair, I need you to know how sorry we are. The money, the lies, the way we pressured you. We thought we were doing the right thing." "I know, Mom. But intentions don't excuse actions. Tonight we're going to fix this mess properly." Emma twisted her engagement ring nervously. "What if Marcus gets angry? What if he breaks up with me when he finds out about the money?" I looked at my sister, really seeing her for perhaps the first time as an adult rather than the spoiled child I'd been protecting for years. "Emma, if Marcus only wants you when he thinks you're financially independent and he breaks up with you when he learns your family helped support you, then he's not someone you want to marry anyway." The grandfather clock chimed 7 times, each note ringing through the house like a countdown to reckoning. In 1 hour, Marcus Wellington would walk into our home expecting to charm a family of simple people with his wealth and pedigree. Instead, he was going to find out that sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who hold all the cards. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 o'clock punctual, as you'd expect from someone raised with old money manners. Through the front window, I could see Marcus Wellington standing on our porch, holding an enormous bouquet of white roses and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He looked exactly like Central Casting's idea of a wealthy Connecticut air-tall, broad-shouldered, thick hair, perfectly styled, wearing a cashmere coat that fit like it was tailored specifically for his frame. Even from a distance, confidence radiated from him like expensive cologne. Emma rushed to answer the door, her nervous energy filling the hallway as she smoothed her hair and checked her reflection in the mirror one last time. "Marcus!" she exclaimed with forced brightness, throwing her arms around him. "I'm so glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss meeting my future in-laws," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the polished authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I presume." Gerald and Patricia stood awkwardly in the living room doorway, clearly intimidated by Marcus's presence. He towered over Gerald by at least 6 inches and carried himself with the easy grace of someone who'd never questioned whether he belonged somewhere. "These are for you, Mrs. Thompson," Marcus said, presenting the roses with a practiced smile. "And this is a 20-year-old Bordeaux I thought we might share tonight." Patricia accepted the flowers with trembling hands, clearly overwhelmed by their obvious expense. Gerald nodded appreciatively at the wine bottle, though I doubted he could pronounce half the French words on the label. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet my brother Alistair," Emma said, guiding him toward where I stood near the kitchen entrance. Marcus extended his hand with the firm grip of someone who'd been taught proper handshake technique at the country club. "Alistair Thompson, Emma tells me you work in technology. Software engineering." I replied, maintaining eye contact. "Specifically, I design financial management systems for large commercial clients." Something flickered across Marcus's expression, too quick for anyone else to notice, but I caught it. Recognition, concern, the look of someone who suddenly realized the conversation might not go as planned. "Fascinating field," he said smoothly. "The intersection of technology and finance is really shaping the future of business." "It certainly is," I agreed. "In fact, I've been working on some particularly interesting projects lately. Financial pattern analysis, cryptocurrency integration, trading optimization systems." Marcus's handshake became slightly less firm. "Really sounds complex." "Oh, it is, especially when you start noticing irregular patterns in trading data. Patterns that suggest someone might have advanced information about market movements." Emma looked between us with growing confusion. "Are you two going to talk shop all night? I thought this was supposed to be a family dinner." "Of course," Marcus said, his practiced charm reasserting itself. "I'm here to properly ask for your daughter's hand in marriage, Mr. Thompson." He reached into his coat pocket and produced a ring box that looked like it had been crafted by angels. The diamond inside caught the living room light and threw rainbow patterns across the ceiling. "This has been in my family for 3 generations," Marcus continued, dropping to one knee with theatrical precision. "Emma Thompson, will you officially agree to become my wife?" Patricia gasped and clutched Gerald's arm. Emma burst into fresh tears, though these seemed genuinely happy. Even Gerald appeared moved by the formal proposal, despite everything that had happened earlier. But I wasn't impressed by expensive theater. "Marcus," I said, interrupting the romantic moment. "Before we celebrate anything, I think we need to discuss your business practices." He stood up slowly, closing the ring box. "I'm not sure what you mean." I pulled out my laptop and set it on the coffee table, opening the files I'd prepared. "I mean Wellington Properties cryptocurrency investments. Specifically the trading patterns that show someone using insider real estate information to manipulate digital currency markets." The color drained from Marcus's face like water from a broken bathtub. Emma stared at my laptop screen. What is he talking about, Marcus? I have no idea, Marcus said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Your brother seems to be making accusations based on incomplete data. Actually, the data is quite complete, I replied, scrolling through the trading records. $347,000 in cryptocurrency profits over the past year, all from trades that perfectly predicted market movements based on real estate deals that hadn't been announced publicly yet. Gerald moved closer to look at the screen. Son, explain this in terms I can understand. Marcus has been using confidential information from his father's real estate company to make illegal stock and cryptocurrency trades. He knows when Wellington Properties is going to buy or develop land, so he invests in related markets before that information becomes public. Patricia's mouth fell open. That's cheating. It's called securities fraud, I corrected. It's a federal crime that carries up to 20 years in prison. Marcus straightened his tie, a nervous gesture that betrayed his growing panic. You have no proof of intentional wrongdoing. Market analysis requires sophisticated research. Research like knowing 3 weeks in advance that Wellington Properties was going to buy the Hartford waterfront development site. I pulled up another screen showing time-stamped trades. You invested $200,000 in waterfront-adjacent cryptocurrency funds exactly 21 days before your father's company announced the purchase. Emma looked at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. Marcus, is this true? Baby, you have to understand everyone in commercial real estate does this kind of thing. It's just smart investing. Everyone doesn't do federal crimes, I said firmly. And everyone doesn't lie to their fiancés about the source of their wealth. The doorbell rang again, cutting through the tension like a knife. Through the window, I could see Detective Jake Morrison's unmarked police car in our driveway. Marcus's eyes went wide with genuine fear. Who is that? Detective Morrison from the Financial Crimes Unit, I replied, walking toward the front door. I called him earlier about some irregularities I'd discovered in a client's investment activities. You called the police? Emma's voice rose to a near shriek. I called the authorities about federal crimes I discovered through my work, I corrected, opening the door for Jake. Detective Morrison was a stocky man in his 40s, with the patient demeanor of someone who'd seen every type of white-collar criminal imaginable. He showed his badge and nodded politely to my family. Mr. Thompson, thank you for calling this in. Is this the subject we discussed? Marcus stepped forward, attempting to regain control of the situation. Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Marcus Wellington, Vice President of Wellington Properties. Perhaps you know my father. I know your father's company is under federal investigation for securities violations, Detective Morrison replied calmly. And I know you've been flagged for suspicious trading activity for the past 6 months. The room went completely silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock and the sound of Marcus's world crashing down around him. Emma sank into the nearest chair, the engagement ring box slipping from her fingers onto the carpet. 6 months? You've been under investigation for 6 months? Marcus looked around the room like a trapped animal, realizing that his charming smile and family connections weren't going to save him this time. I want to call my lawyer, he said quietly. That's certainly your right, Detective Morrison replied. But first, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your cryptocurrency investments and their relationship to your company's real estate activities. I watched my sister's face as the reality of her situation sank in. The wealthy prince she thought she was marrying was actually a criminal whose illegal activities were about to destroy both their futures. And for the first time all day, I felt like justice was finally being served. Marcus attempted to maintain his composure, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the November chill coming through our old windows. Detective, I'd really prefer to have my attorney present before discussing any business matters. Of course, Detective Morrison replied with the patience of someone who'd heard that request 1,000 times. But since we're here, and since Mr. Thompson has provided such detailed evidence, maybe you'd like to clarify a few things informally. Emma stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Marcus, just tell them this is all a mistake. Tell them you're not a criminal. Marcus reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Emma, you have to trust me. This is just a misunderstanding about investment timing. Investment timing. I interrupted, pulling up another screen on my laptop. Is that what you call transferring $347,000 in illegal gains to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands? The room went dead silent. Even Detective Morrison looked impressed by the thoroughness of my research. Marcus's practiced charm finally cracked completely. How do you have access to that information? Because I designed the financial software your company uses, I replied. Every transaction, every transfer, every cryptocurrency trade flows through systems I built and maintain. I have access to data going back 3 years. Gerald stepped forward, his construction worker instincts finally kicking in after watching his daughter get manipulated. So you're saying this boy has been stealing money and hiding it from the government? That's exactly what I'm saying, Dad. Tax evasion on cryptocurrency, gains totaling $89,000 in unpaid taxes. Wire fraud through shell companies adds another $156,000 in criminal liability. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus, tell me they're wrong. Tell me you didn't do these things. Marcus looked around the room, calculating his options, realizing he had none that didn't involve prison time. Emma, baby, you have to understand the pressure I was under. My father expects results. The company needed profits. I was just trying to succeed. By committing felonies, Detective Morrison interjected. Mr. Wellington, you're looking at securities, fraud, tax, evasion, money laundering, and wire fraud. We're talking about potential sentences of 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Patricia gasped and grabbed Gerald's arm for support. Emma began crying again, but these weren't tears of joy anymore. This can't be happening, Emma sobbed. We were supposed to get married next month. We had everything planned. Marcus's mask slipped, completely revealing the entitled coward underneath. Look, everyone makes mistakes. I can pay back the taxes. I can return the money. There has to be a way to work this out. Actually, there isn't, I said, opening another file on my laptop. Because while you were playing criminal mastermind, I was cooperating with a federal investigation. Detective Morrison nodded. Mr. Thompson contacted the FBI Financial Crimes Unit 3 weeks ago when he first noticed the irregularities. We've been building a case against Wellington Properties' illegal activities ever since. Emma's head snapped up. 3 weeks ago, Alistair, you've known about this for 3 weeks. I've suspected for longer than that, I replied. But I needed concrete evidence before involving law enforcement. The FBI needed someone with inside access to Wellington's financial systems to gather admissible evidence. Marcus's face turned red with rage. You set me up. You invited me here knowing the police were coming. I invited you here hoping you'd be honest with my family, I corrected. Instead, you confirmed everything I suspected about your character. Detective Morrison stepped forward. Mr. Wellington, I'm placing you under arrest for securities fraud and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. As the detective read Marcus his rights, Emma collapsed into the nearest chair, holding her head in her hands. The engagement ring Marcus had presented with such ceremony lay forgotten on the carpet, its diamond catching the light like a fallen star. Gerald picked up the ring box and studied it with the practical eye of someone who'd worked with his hands his entire life. Probably worth more than our house, he said quietly. And it's all built on lies. Patricia sat down beside Emma, putting her arm around our daughter's shoulders. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. We all wanted you to be happy. Happy. Emma looked up with mascara streaked down her cheeks. I was about to marry a criminal. How is that happy? As Detective Morrison led Marcus toward the front door, Marcus turned back one last time. Emma, this isn't over. My father has connections. I'll fight these charges. Your father doesn't know about your activities yet, I replied. But he will when the FBI freezes Wellington Properties accounts tomorrow morning as part of their investigation. Marcus's face went white as he realized the scope of his situation. His illegal activities weren't just going to destroy his freedom, they were going to bring down his family's entire business empire. The whistleblower bonus for exposing securities fraud is typically 10% of recovered funds, Detective Morrison mentioned as he reached the door. Mr. Thompson, you're looking at approximately $200,000 for your cooperation. After they left, our house felt different, quieter, cleaner somehow, like a storm had passed and left clear air behind. Emma sat in stunned silence, occasionally wiping her eyes with tissues Patricia brought her. Gerald stood at the window, watching the police car disappear down our street. I can't believe I almost married him, Emma finally said. I thought I was so smart keeping him secret, building my own security. But I was just being used by someone even more manipulative than I was. The honesty in her admission surprised me. The money I took from you, she continued, looking directly at me. The lies about art school, the fake struggling artist routine, I became someone I don't even recognize. Gerald turned from the window. We all did, sweetheart. We all lost sight of what was really important. Patricia nodded, her eyes still red from crying. We taught you that love meant taking care of someone financially instead of helping them grow strong. We were wrong. I closed my laptop and looked around at my family, really looked at them for the first time in years without the haze of resentment and manipulation clouding my vision. The inheritance money is mine, I said quietly. The illegal loans Dad took are void. Detective Morrison confirmed that earlier. Gerald's shoulders sagged with relief and shame simultaneously. Son, we'll find a way to pay back what we took from your account, even if it takes years. Actually, I said, thinking about the whistleblower bonus and the opportunities it would create, I think we can figure out a better solution. One that helps everyone learn to stand on their own feet. For the first time all day, I saw something in my family's faces that had been missing for years, hope mixed with respect instead of expectation and entitlement. It was a start. 6 months later, our Thanksgiving table looked remarkably similar to the scene of last year's disaster, but the energy in the room had transformed completely. The same grandfather clock ticked in the corner. Buddy still waited hopefully beside my chair for dropped turkey bits, and Patricia still fussed over the perfect presentation of her cranberry sauce. But everything else had changed. Gerald carved the turkey with steady hands, the stress lines around his eyes replaced by the quiet confidence of a man who was rebuilding his life honestly. His new construction business was growing slowly, but sustainably funded by contracts I'd helped him secure through my professional network rather than illegal loans or stolen money. The Henderson project is coming along nicely, he said, passing plates around the table. They're so pleased with the work that they're recommending us to their neighbors. Real word-of-mouth business the way it should be. Patricia set down a bowl of mashed potatoes and smiled at him. Your father's company has 3 new clients this month, all from satisfied customers. She'd found her own purpose volunteering at the Community Resource Center, helping families navigate financial difficulties. Helping people she'd discovered felt better than enabling them. Emma entered from the kitchen carrying a basket of homemade rolls, flour still dusting her apron. She'd moved back home initially out of necessity, but stayed because she was finally learning who she could become when she wasn't pretending to be helpless. These actually rose properly this time, she announced, setting the basket on the table with genuine pride. Tom said the secret is patience with the yeast. Tom Morrison, Detective Jake's younger brother, was a high school art teacher who appreciated Emma's talent without wanting to rescue her from imaginary poverty. He treated her like an equal partner rather than a beautiful object that needed protection and financial support. Tom knows his way around bread, I said, accepting a role that smelled like heaven and honest work. Teaching and baking both require patience. Emma had enrolled in business classes at the community college, planning to open her own bakery eventually. Her art had evolved too, becoming more honest and grounded, less focused on impressing people with expensive materials, and more concerned with expressing genuine emotion. I'd used the whistleblower bonus to pay off my parents' mortgage entirely not as a gift, but as an investment in their fresh start. Gerald insisted on paying me back through work on my inherited house, which I'd renovated as a weekend retreat. Patricia contributed by managing the books for Gerald's new business, finally using the organizational skills she'd always possessed. The legal aftermath of Marcus's arrest had been swift and decisive. He'd served 8 months in minimum security federal prison and was now working in a warehouse learning the value of honest labor for the first time in his privileged life. Wellington Properties had survived with new management after Marcus's father disowned him publicly and donated the stolen money to financial crime victim advocacy groups. Emma had returned Marcus's engagement ring without ceremony or drama. She'd also returned every penny she'd taken from the family money she earned working part-time at the local art gallery while attending school. "Remember last year when you told me Emma was born to live soft?" I asked Gerald, buttering my roll slowly. He paused in his carving, looking slightly ashamed. "Worst thing I ever said to either of my children. No one's born to be taken care of indefinitely. Everyone deserves the chance to discover their own strength." Patricia nodded emphatically. "We taught Emma she was a fragile flower who needed constant protection. We nearly destroyed her chance to grow into the strong woman she was meant to become." Emma looked up from arranging rolls on her plate. "I was angry when you exposed Marcus, but you saved me from marrying someone who would have kept me weak forever. Tom likes me because I'm becoming independent, not because I need rescuing." The conversation flowed naturally as we ate, covering Gerald's business challenges, Patricia's volunteer work stories, Emma's school projects, and my own consulting business that had grown beyond my original expectations. We talked like adults who respected each other, rather than like family members playing assigned roles in a dysfunctional drama. After dinner, as we cleared the table together, Patricia pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Alistair, I need you to know how grateful we are for your forgiveness and your help," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But more than that, I'm grateful you taught us what real love looks like." "What do you mean?" "Real love means believing in someone's ability to become strong even when it's harder than just taking care of them. You could have bailed us out and kept us dependent. Instead, you helped us learn to stand on our own feet." Gerald joined us, dish towel in hand. "Your mother's right. The greatest gift you gave us wasn't the money to pay off the mortgage. It was the chance to earn back our self-respect." Emma appeared in the doorway carrying dessert plates. "I've been thinking about what you said last year about family not being about who pays the bills. You were right. Family is about everyone contributing what they can and supporting each other honestly." I looked around at my family. My real family. Not the collection of manipulators and victims we'd been before, and felt a deep sense of peace settle over me like a warm blanket. "You know what I learned through all of this?" I said. "True family strength comes from everyone growing together, not from one person sacrificing everything for another's comfort. When we enable weakness instead of encouraging growth, we hurt the people we think we're helping." Gerald raised his coffee cup. "To Alistair, who taught us that real love means helping people become their best selves, not enabling their worst habits." As we toasted with coffee and apple cider, I reflected on the journey from last year's disaster to this year's genuine celebration. The greatest gift you can give someone isn't money or comfort. It's the chance to discover their own strength. Sometimes love means stepping back and letting people struggle enough to grow rather than rushing in to solve all their problems. Emma was dating someone who challenged her to be better rather than someone who wanted to keep her dependent. Gerald was building a business based on real skills and honest work. Patricia had found purpose in helping others rather than controlling her children's lives. And I had learned the difference between being generous and being a doormat. We were finally a family built on mutual respect and shared growth rather than guilt manipulation and financial obligation. As we finished our coffee and prepared to clean up, I realized this was what true family satisfaction felt like, not the exhausted relief of having solved everyone else's problems, but the deep contentment of watching people you love become the strongest versions of themselves. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where helping someone actually made them weaker instead of stronger? Family dynamics can be so complex, and sometimes the kindest thing we can do is step back and let people grow through their own challenges. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about finding that balance between supporting loved ones and enabling dependence. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and personal growth. Share it with someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Sometimes we all need reminders about what healthy support really looks like. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings some clarity to your own family relationships. May you find the courage to love people enough to believe in their strength even when it's harder than just taking care of them.